Over the last couple of months, people have fought in store qualifiers to be able to qualify for regional events. In Japan, you only have one shot at these regionals. If you manage to get top 16 in these regionals, you then qualify for nationals. Today, we are at the National Championship, the pinnacle of Japanese play in OP10. Today, I'm going to be watching the games live, giving my thoughts as they go on, and then eventually talking about the deck list that ended up winning or barely not making it there. Everyone in this tournament is an extremely high-level player, so compared to the other tournaments where I only talked about the top 16 or top 32 deck lists, in this tournament, I'm going to be talking about the entire tournament and the scope of the decks that people have brought that worked or ended up not working. I'm also here today with Fidelity TCG, another YouTuber in Japan who makes a lot of Wano content. And because we just both happen to be here, I guess let me just ask you, you already know that Doflamingo is probably going to be at the top of the share, but what do you think could kind of break into the top 32?
I think, actually, because it's like slightly smaller player pool today, maybe, obviously Dofi, yeah. I think Teach, and I think, weirdly, even though I'm saying Teach, I also think Lucci is going to be pretty big. Okay. I think he's like going to make a little bit of a comeback.
I see. Do you think Lucci's going to end up winning, or who do you think's going to win?
I want to say, like, Dofi's just going to win. I really think Dofi's finally going to just, like, really take it home. He keeps topping in Japan, especially, and, like, just not making it to the, like, obviously he won one last time during the Wave 2 finals and stuff, but I think today might be his day. But if I want to say, like, who I want to win, I want Bonnie to win. I know there's at least one. I know there's one or a few people that I'm rooting for them to try and at least make it into top cut for all the green players out there.
My take is that because it's a smaller scale tournament of only the best players, there's going to be a massive number of people playing Doflamingo, obviously. And because of that, I don't think that the Teach players are going to want to play Teach.
True. So that's true.
I think that although Teach, especially in OP10, is really strong, just because of how small the tournament is of these like exclusively top level players, you can't actually dodge Doflamingo.
Yeah, there's no dodging him today.
You're going to hit Doflamingo several times. So unless you've figured out that matchup as Teach, I think it's kind of hard to bring Teach. So then my read is that I think Black Yellow Luffy's going to win.
Oh, like, you think they saw Cross the other day and they were like, it's time to bring BY?
Shout out Cross.
Yeah, shout out to Cross for the win.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Congrats.
So completely independent of that, I think that, well, actually maybe it is kind of similar.
I think you might be right though, dude. That's not a bad call.
I think that people weren't respecting Teach at all because there's a ton of Teach and Lucci in the NA nationals as well.
Yes.
And maybe once people start to catch on to that, or just accept that maybe they'll lose to Doflamingo, but they'll beat the other matchups, which is what people do in Japan, that then Teach will rise and those sort of decks will fall. But because this tournament only has good players, which means a lot of Doflamingo, I think that people won't bring Teach. And then with that read, I think Black Yellow Luffy's good.
That's a good call. Honestly, that's probably the most like logical call. We might see some Teach in Top Cut. I'll put it that way. But I think in Top Cut, I think there will for sure be enough Dofi that they just won't get past like maybe top 8 or something.
I think that's fair.
So then it's like basically who slips through the cracks. That's the anti-Dofi deck, whether it's Bonnie or Lucci or BY. How many of those make it to Top Cut? And then it's just going to be like a brawl for like from the top 8 to see who can get the win. Yeah.
So we're nearing the end of the preliminary rounds before the stream actually starts, and the people who are playing you can see behind me, but I don't want to get too close because it would be a bit awkward. But unfortunately, it seems like there's a lot of really boring decks. Basically, the top tables are just Blue Doflamingo, Teach, or the other random decks like Blue-Black Usopp, Shanks, Purple Luffy, these sorts of decks. I am actually surprised by the number of Teach, so I guess that OP10 Teach is just so much stronger than OP9 Teach, that despite the bad Doflamingo matchup, you still choose to bring him due to the other matchups. However, there are a couple of Black Yellow Luffy, so it'll be interesting to see if they actually can make the top cut, and then how their matchups end up being, if they can end up making it to the top, because that's where my money is on right now. With the number of Teach that I'm seeing though, it'll probably end up being a Doflamingo win, but we'll see. Maybe we'll get something interesting. Of the roughly 200 people that entered this tournament, 32 of them not only make top cut, but the Japan finals that are held 1 month after this tournament. These are the decks that made it into the top cut. Now, as expected, we're seeing lots of Blue Doflamingo, and in terms of power of deck, Teach is still the second best deck. Although I didn't expect the deck to be this represented due to the fact that it has a Blue Doflamingo matchup, it is undeniably the second strongest deck, so it makes sense that it would still be the second most represented deck in Top Cut. After these two decks, we have lots of random decks such as Shanks, Yellow Kid, Purple Luffy that managed to get a small share in the top cut, but Teach and Doflamingo make up over half of the entire top cut, making these two the decks to watch out for. Now, sorry to those who haven't actually seen these tournament results and were looking for a more narrative video, but now we're going into the more informative section. The winner of this tournament was actually, as I predicted, Black Yellow Luffy. I didn't actually think for a while throughout this tournament that Black Yellow Luffy would end up winning due to the fact that I was seeing lots of Teach. But as we see from his match history, he was able to dodge all of the Teaches that he fought except for one. But this one Teach came at the most pivotal timing for him. The final round of Swiss, when he was 4-1. If he loses this match, he's out of the tournament and out of contention for the Japan Finals. If he wins this match, he's guaranteed to be in the Japan Finals. In this pivotal match, he was able to win against Teach, not only netting him a spot at the Japan Finals, but of course, eventually allowing him to win the entire Wave 2 Nationals. Black Yellow Luffy has an extremely powerful template of 44 to 46 cards that are basically guaranteed to be in every single list that you run. The deck has not changed that much since EV01 effectively, where Flampe entered the list. However, there are a few changes as we can see, mainly the 1-cost Kabonebechi and the 5-cost Sabo. First, let's talk about the 1-cost Kabonebechi. Now, this card allows you to take one of your life cards and put a Supernova card into your life. This deck only runs one Supernova card, and that's the 5-cost start deck Luffy. Now, only being able to put this card into your life feels a bit inconsistent, and while you may still argue that Iwankofu is better, Iwankofu, of course, although he's a blocker, forces you to trash one of your life to be able to put a card into your life. Kabonebechi has been seeing lots of play in this deck at specifically 2 copies. It's hard to justify running more than that because there's only one target for the deck, and generally it seems like the better option over something like the 1-cost Makino. While the 1-cost Bechi in a way is more copies of Hiyori, the 5-cost Sabo is, in a way, more copies of Luffy. Now, of course, this Sabo is only 5-cost 5,000, and the extra attack is only on your turn. But because it's activate main and not on play, it means that you have more means to take your life against the Teach matchup. The difficulty with the Teach matchup not only is that you can't use your 8-cost Moria, but also that it's very difficult to be able to draw your life through things like the 1-cost Furampe, the 2-cost Hiyori, or the 1-cost Bechi. Having more means, such as the 5-cost Luffy, to be able to draw your life allows you to control your life a little bit more going into the late game in these matchups. Of course, there was no stream for the preliminary round, so we can't tell if this card actually made a difference, but this is generally what the card is being used for now. So perhaps when OP10 comes around in the West and you're allowed to use this promo card, this could be a decent card to be able to tech for the Teach matchup, should it be prevalent. Nonetheless, call it luck, call it whatever you like. This Black Yellow Luffy had a great meta read and was able to dodge Teach throughout lots of the day and beat Teach where he needed to eventually hold the trophy on this day. Now, before we go into the other decks that made it into the top 32, I want to talk about decks that didn't quite make it there, but are still interesting. The interesting deck that I want to talk about is actually Black Moria. Now, Black Moria we haven't seen recently too much due to the fact that Lucci as well as Black Teach have taken the premier mono black spot. However, one person did bring it, and as we could see from his match history on the day, he beat all of the blue Doflamingos that he hit, but he lost to all of the Teaches that he hit on the day. Unfortunately, this is probably the reason why people don't play Moria in general, but it is kind of similar to the way that Lucci wants to play. The fact that he was able to beat all of the blue Doflamingos that he hit is actually quite interesting though. It has a lot more consistency in the fact that you can actually grab a custom Moria from your trash, should you drop it into your trash through your leader ability, but also it has a much more explosive early game, and effectively, because of the leader ability, you're in a way playing Black Doflamingo, but with some of the tools such as Ice Age as well as Epsilon to be able to clear the opponent's board as you spread your own. The deck as a package seems to function very well and only seems to be getting stronger due to the fact that we're getting things such as the 7-cost Sengoku in EB02. Now, from my research, there was also a Zoro player who played in this tournament. However, of course, he didn't end up making it into the top 32, and he didn't end up posting his list. Looking at a deck that actually did make it into the top 32, and actually made it all the way to the top 16 spot, is Enel. I first and foremost want to show the Enel list, because it's very different from the standard Enel list. As we can see, this Enel list, first of all, doesn't run the 5-cost Nami, which has become standard within the list, but
runs not only the 7-cost Enel, but also the 4-cost event that can play the 7-cost Enel out of trash. This Enel player named Inochi made a note or paid article on his Enel that he brought to this day, which I will link in the description, but he put the list for free, which is very kind of him. According to him, the reason why he doesn't run the 5-cost Nami is that it's only really better than this 5-cost Luffy in the purple Luffy matchup. In purple Luffy, of course, they play 5-cost characters, but as Doflamingo only plays 4-cost characters, this card, allowing you to also draw a card, ends up being better in that matchup according to him. And he says that the purple Luffy matchup, regardless of if you do find this 5-cost Nami, is still going to be losing if the opponent finds your parts, so he wants to make sure that he doesn't drop any important matchups and just tries to dodge the purple Luffy matchup. The 7-cost Enel, as well as the event, and the 3-cost Bonnie are all tech for the Blackbeard matchup. By being able to put down the 3-cost Bonnie in the early game, not only does it give you another attacker from the next turn, but also it lets you 2-draw 1 trash from very early on, because Teach players generally don't like to defend their life in the early game. As such, as long as they don't trigger something like a finger pistol, this Bonnie will end up doing lots of work, allowing you to not only make your hand a lot better so that you can survive longer into the late game, but also allowing you to drop the 7-cost Enel into the trash, which can of course then be called back with the 4-cost event. In this way, you can do some interesting things on the Tendong turn by using Kingdom Kong to get rid of their 10-cost and still playing 7-cost Enel thanks to the event from your trash. However, despite this, he does say that the Teach matchup is still losing, but if you can manage to tech more for Teach and still be able to beat the Doflamingo matchup as he did on the day, then perhaps this is quite a good build to follow. Moving on to the currently more popular yellow list, we have Yellow Kid. Yellow Kid was actually 3 out of the top 32 decks. It didn't end up winning. The deck still did much better than, of course, Yellow Enel. While Yellow Enel generally just plays all of the best cards that it can due to its leader effect being very universal, Yellow Kid needs to have Supernova cards due to the fact that he can only turn Supernova cards into blockers. However, due to the fact that he has such exceptionally powerful cards like the 7-cost Slaw or the 8-cost Kid that don't synergize too well with Enel, there is actually a lot of merit to playing Yellow Kid over Enel. This was one of the things that I messed up in my analysis of the deck because I assumed that it would just be a worse Enel, but it does mix Katakuri and Enel in a very good way, being not only aggressive with tools to be able to burn the opponent's life through things such as the 4-cost Hawkins or the 8-cost Kid, but also being very defensive due to the fact that he has a million blockers. The fact that Kid's vanilla cards can not only restand at the end of the turn, but become blockers as well, make the leader quite tanky with a lot of power on the board due to being able to play these really high-statted characters. As such, the deck does play quite similar to Enel, but due to the fact that it has all of these very high power line characters that come out in the early game, can actually come online and be more aggressive at a much earlier stage compared to Enel. However, similar to Enel, it does still have a bad Teach matchup. This Yellow Kid player really went through the gauntlet. All of the unique tools in this deck come together to make a very aggressive yet defensive deck, making it very unique even for yellow decks. The next 3 decks I'm going to be talking about a little bit quickly due to the fact that the lists that people brought were quite standard. The first of these lists is Purple Luffy. Now, Purple Luffy generally has a standard set of about 40 to 45 cards that he will basically always run in this meta. Due to the fact that the meta hasn't changed in a while, the general consensus is to just run 4 of the Luffy Taro, 3 of the 9-cost Thinning, and 2 of the 9-cost Luffy. But there are a couple of different 2000 counters that are coming into the list, namely the other 3-cost Usohachi and the 5-cost Furanosuke. Both of these cards are anti-Teach tech. The Furanosuke can get Rush if you attach Dong to him, and the Usohachi, of course, is on attack, meaning that it can actually rest the opponent's 4-cost Jesus Ba just because it's not on play like the other Usohachi. The list generally hasn't changed for all of OP10 at this point, but the 2000 counters can change pretty interchangeably, especially as these are Straw Hats, making them searchable as well. The second list that I want to talk about is Shanks. Now, though this list is a little bit unique, I don't want to spend too much time on it, as it didn't actually end up doing that well. I couldn't actually find any of the Shanks lists that made it into the top 32, but this is one of the lists that were in the tournament. It kind of has a mix between aggressive tools in the 3-cost Sanji as well as 3-cost Zoro, but also the standard defensive tools that you're used to seeing, such as the 10-cost Shanks. One interesting thing, of course, is that it runs the OP06 KO 10-cost Shanks as well, perhaps to deal with things such as the Mirror and other sorts of slower decks that it might hit. The final rapid-fire review is of one of the big bad decks of OP10, Black Teach. The reason I'm not going to talk about this too much is because a lot of my other videos I already talked about the way that Teach wants to play, and the list has not changed at all. Effectively, in OP10, the list has solidified due to there just being so many good cards in comparison to all of the bad Blackbeard Pirate cards. The addition of 5-cost Kuzang makes the deck significantly more powerful, and the 6-cost Liberation helps you deal with the board against Doflamingo. One thing I do want to point out specifically about this Teach player is that in his preliminary rounds, he hit Doflamingo 4 times and beat them all 4 times. Although he did end up losing to Doflamingo in the top 16 match, still that puts him at a 4-1 record in the day against Doflamingo, which should be his most difficult matchup. For those who just accept that the Teach versus Doflamingo matchup is an auto-lose, maybe think again, because this is one of the best Teach players against some of the best Doflamingo players in Japan. The next and final deck that I'm going to be talking about within this video is one that I actually usually skim over, and that is Blue Doflamingo. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this deck a little bit more in detail this time is due to the fact that there are a couple of interesting tech cards that have entered the deck. The second place Blue Doflamingo, who ended up losing to the Black Yellow Luffy in the finals, runs 9-cost Mihawk. I believe that the reason for this tech card is the mirror, similar to the way that Jackson Huang was putting in the 7-cost Doflamingo at the beginning of OP09 to deal with the opponent's 6-cost Jose. I believe that this 9-cost Mihawk does the same thing. Perhaps he was afraid of Jackson Huang's 7-cost Doflamingo, so he decided to go one step further and put in the 9-cost Mihawk. To me, these cards have a similar sort of role, and the 7-cost Doflamingo being a little bit cheaper seems like the better option to me, but this Doflamingo player was able to get to 2nd place in the tournament, beating the Doflamingo mirrors that it hit along the way. The other interesting card that this deck specifically runs is the 1-cost Kaya. Now, this deck, if you've played it before, you'll know that there's actually not that many ways to get cards out of your hand. The only way that you can actually cycle cards out of your hand with this deck is to attack with the 4-cost Mihawk. Now, not only does this cost 1, but also because it's on attack, a lot of times it just doesn't make it to the next turn. As such, some people run the 1-cost Kaya to prevent the deck from bricking, especially in the early game when you're just looking for some pieces. Just throwing this down is perfectly fine due to the fact that it can easily be bounced as well by something like the 4-cost Law or the 6-cost Jose. Now, one thing to point out about this tournament that hasn't really played an important factor in the video up until now is that all of these players have actually qualified through other tournaments to get to this point. This means that we can actually see the way that the decks have changed from the first tournament that they entered, which qualified for this, and the deck list that they ended up bringing to the actual finals. I looked through people's profiles, and a lot of times people just didn't post their lists, or they're very similar to the ones that they ended up bringing to the Wave 2 finals, but this Doflamingo list by Roma Taro is extremely different from the one that he ended up doing well with. The deck that he qualified with originally is a much slower version of Doflamingo. It runs the 10-cost Kaido, which we don't really see nowadays, and the 6-cost Red Rock to really try to control the board in the late game. However, in the Wave 2 finals, he made almost a complete 180 and took out all of the Red Rocks, took out all of the 10-cost Kaidos, and instead put in Hound Blaze. Hound Blaze is a card we haven't seen since Sakazuki was around. But because this card can bottom deck a 2-cost, it could perhaps be really strong in the mirror to get rid of the opponent's 2-cost Teaches. This was the only player that I've seen running this card, but he did end up getting into the top 16, so it is very interesting to consider all of these events that people can choose, as of course the 2nd place deck list did run Red Rock. Still, despite this, the more common option that people are running is Gravity Blade.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you do want to see more of these sorts of things, I do plan on putting them out even if we don't have championships. So if you are interested in that, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I got the YouTuber thing down.
Nice.